Hello everyone and welcome to episode 45 of Generation GC, Broken Hearts Parade from Good Morning Revival, Good Charlotte's fourth album released in 2007 with Justin Hensley from Punk Lotto Pod. Last week we talked about Mountain from the Chronicles of Life and Death, and next week we'll be talking about a song from Cardiology. This was originally episode 44, but the special emergency update episode on last December has pushed this to become episode 45. You'll hear me mention it as episode 44 at the end. Justin Hensley is one of the co-hosts of the podcast Punk Lotto Pod, and he's taken part in the punk and hardcore scene in a lot of different ways over the years, from playing in bands to booking shows, writing, and now podcasting. The premise of Punk Lotto Pod is that they assign their guests a year, and then the guest will pick a punk, hardcore, emo, or punk adjacent album to talk about. It's a really great listen. I highly recommend you check it out if you just want to learn more about punk music and all related genres through the ages. Justin lives in rural North Carolina with his wife and their pet cat, Edmund. Well, folks, this is our first episode of 2021, and as I write this intro, Generation GC is sitting at 4,884 plays via our stats on Anchor, and that's so sick. Like, we're going to reach 5,000 plays, I mean, honestly, well before the show turns a year old in April, and that just makes me so happy. It's incredible. Just please, keep engaging with the show online. Please send it to your friends that love Good Charlotte. And please reach out to me if you want to talk about the show, if you want to talk about Good Charlotte in general, or if you just want to be friends. Because, if you're a Good Charlotte fan, chances are we have some things in common. And now a reminder. Please visit antisemitism.card.co and blacklivesmatters.card.co to learn more about anti-Semitism and the Black Lives Matter movement, respectively. In 2021, I want to see us all continuing to educate ourselves and learn more about maybe things we don't understand or people who are different from us. Finally, Generation GC stickers are here. If you want a sticker, there's two ways you can get one. Number one, you can go to anchor.fm/generationgcpod and click support and support the show on there. And that helps me keep the show going. Everything I make via Anchor goes right back into the show, from the stickers themselves to new headphones, different cables, adapters, laptop stands, all the things that I need to make the show the best that it can be. Number two, you can make a charitable donation to any organization listed at blacklivesmatters.card.co. Whatever amount you can afford to give would make a huge difference. And then you're going to take a screenshot of either your support of the show on Anchor or your charitable donation and send me that and your mailing address, and I will send you stickers. You can reach out to me on socials at GenerationGCPod, P-O-D, or send me an email, generationgcpod@gmail.com, and I'll send you stickers. Well, that's about it for our intro, and now on to episode 45.
Okay, so Broken Hearts Parade is track 12 on Good Morning Revival, Good Charlotte's fourth album released in 2007. Track 11 was Something Else. Track 13 is March On. So you have kind of sentimental, sort of wistful, I guess. Whatever this is, which I guess is pretty... we'll dive into whatever this song is. And then it's super just emotional, contented, feeling a lot of things, hopeful to end it. So this song was not a single, so there's no chart notes or radio play to mention. I don't believe it was ever played live, and we will dive into that. It was written by Benji and Joel Madden and Don Gilmore, who had produced this album, and hopefully that name sounds familiar, y'all, because Don Gilmore also previously produced the band's self-titled album, and he would later produce Cardiology, so, y'all should know that name. We will talk about this in detail, but horns. This song has horns. And Justin, in one of your messages to me, you said, I love the fake horns. I think it's real horns. It's credited in the album booklet as the incognito horns. I tried to look that up. the only Discogs reference for the Incognito Horns is this song. There is a British acid jazz band called Incognito, but I don't think that's who's on this, because there's nothing like about, like, you search Incognito and Good Charlotte and nothing for that comes up.
Yeah, I ran into the exact same issue when I was researching for this album too, because I was like, who are the Incognito Horns? I cannot find any information about them, and they could be real. I don't know.
I mean, it could be later. Like, I also have a thought that, you know, sometimes when celebrities, like superstar artists, write on a song, they'll use like a pen name. Mm-hmm. Like, I believe Taylor Swift will write with other artists and use a pen name kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it could be something like that, and that's why we're not finding anything else out about the Incognito Horns, especially because Incognito makes me kind of think. Yeah.
Suspicious there.
Right. So, who knows? There is also, I found a GC Broken Hearts Parade Twitter fan account. They have not tweeted in over 10 years, but, you know, that exists. And I never knew this. I didn't watch these shows, but this song was played on 90210 and The Hills. So that's the thing. It was played on 90210, Season 1, Episode 13, Love Me or Leave Me. And it was played on The Hills, Season 4, Episode 8, Don't Act Innocent. And I was like, that is kind of funny because, you know, obviously TV shows often will play songs that are not necessarily the singles, right? A song doesn't have to be a single or a radio hit to get TV syncs. But this is like such a odd song that I was like, what? Anyway, so I did some Googling. The Hills has played like a lot of Good Charlotte. I don't know why, but whoever was so let's go through this list. Season 1, Episode 2, I Just Want to Live. Season 1, Episode 3, Hold On. Season 3, Episode 3, Keep Your Hands Off My Girl. Season 3, Episode 14, Predictable. Season 3, Episode 19, Break Apart Her Heart. Season 3, Episode 28, Where Will We Be Now? I don't know. I guess someone working on The Hills, you know, doing the music placements for The Hills, just really liked Good Charlotte.
I have a little something to add about The Hills.
Yes.
So, this is really odd too. The band Alkaline Trio is actually on an episode of The Hills.
Like, the band is on an episode?
Yeah, and it's a pretty hilarious scene, honestly, because...
Isn't The Hills, like, not scripted, but, like, they basically make up situations and they have to kind of play it out?
I thought it had the impression that it was a, like, fake reality show.
Yeah.
That, like, they had stuff written for them.
Yeah.
But the one scene where Alkaline Trio appears is one of the characters knows someone at a recording studio, so they were meeting them there. And while they were there, Alkaline Trio is just performing a song off of This Addiction, I believe is the record. And they're just playing while the other characters are in like the sound booth just talking to each other and saying like...
And they're just like in the background?
Yeah.
I mean, probably Alkaline Trio got a nice payday for that, you know? Like,
I would assume it was probably during their major label little stint there. But it ends in this hilarious fashion. That's just they're standing there awkwardly watching. One of the characters like, "This is good, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then like they stand there a few minutes later, and then a few minutes later, someone goes, "Let's go get sushi," and then they just leave.
I have never watched The Hills. I mean, maybe some passing moments, but I never like watched it. I know that Elsie is like, you know, the main girl. I will say, though, knowing what I know about the show, it's kind of funny that so much of this album is played on The Hills because they're, like, making this whole album that's about, like, the concise way that I would say it is, like, their frustrations and cynicism around Hollywood and such, to put it very succinctly. And that it gets played on the Hills, a fake reality show about rich people in LA. Like, that is something. And honestly, I feel like that's the kind of thing that Good Charlotte would probably be like totally stoked about. Like, you know, so also they're probably not mad because they probably got, you know, a little payday.
Yeah, I would assume. I assume they get paid a decent little amount just for being on an MTV TV show. So
yeah. Did you watch The Hills like outside of that
No.
Alkaline Trio thing?
No, like that kind of became like a little like viral thing amongst me and my friends.
Sure, yeah.
Because we all love Alkaline Trio, so like.
Well, and I was gonna say I don't think there's a huge overlap. Not to generalize, but I would not imagine there's a huge. You know what? I'm gonna correct myself because I was gonna say I don't imagine there's a huge overlap between people who like Alkaline Trio and people who watch The Hills. But honestly, like all my friends who like punk music, a lot of them also like reality TV. So
yeah. It was just odd seeing them on screen more so than even just hearing their music, because we're all kind of used to, oh, that's a band that like their music is played in an episode, but the band itself usually does not show up in the episode or whatever it is.
Right. That's really funny. Oh God. Yeah, that's really funny, and I kind of want to go. I'm sure that's on YouTube, so I'll have to go watch that.
Oh yeah, that clip is definitely on YouTube.
Yeah, that's funny. I'll have to go watch that. I love that, and I don't know if you ever watched Degrassi. Not a reality show, a scripted show, very much a scripted fictional show. But there was a great 2-part episode with Taking Back Sunday.
I've seen episodes, but I've never been like hardcore into like whole seasons and series.
The Taking Back Sunday episode apparently came about because Taking Back Sunday was like, we want to be on Degrassi. You know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So before we get, you know, deep into Broken Hearts Parade, Justin, I want to help our listeners get to know you. So first questions I like to ask is, when did you first hear Good Charlotte and what were your first thoughts on them? So
I went down kind of a rabbit hole trying to remember exactly when I heard them the first time. My most standout memory is probably Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 2002, I believe. I must have heard Little Things before, though, because I know that song now, and it probably got some radio play in my area, just not as extensively as Lifestyles. Lifestyles is the first time I was like, I know who that band, like I know who this band is because of this song. And the weirdest thing is, like, I think the first place I heard the song, I also saw the video, was in a Walmart.
Okay.
Because they used to have these displays where they would have like their TVs and everything near like the music department, and they used to play music videos on them. So
I mean, those are good placements for a band. Like, that's a really good placement. That's so much foot traffic.
So like I saw that there, and I was like, "Hey, this song's pretty catchy." And then it got a little bit more radio play, and then Anthem had some radio play as well. And then they got really big on that record. And I personally, I sent this in our first conversation early on, that I wouldn't call myself a fan of the band because they were just never a band that I got into myself.
Sure.
And so like I didn't really get into them. So like, and then because during this time I was in my like listening to a lot of radio, so there's still a lot of new metal in there. I was also listening to a lot of Christian ska and punk, so
which honestly is not that far removed from Good Charlotte, but
right. One of the bands I was obsessed with at the time was MXPX.
Oh, there you go.
They had some connections with on their 2003 album, so I was kind of in that area, but they were never a band that I personally got into, and then they kind of developed a reputation of not being very cool to like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure since you're doing this show, you're aware of.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
so, like,
I wrote a whole essay right before I launched this show. Just an essay about how they're not cool.
Right. They didn't have a great reputation. I don't know. It's probably just because of the type of exposure they had. Like, there's a lot of Hot Topic stuff with them on it.
Yeah.
And Hot Topic is a weird, like, if you're under a certain age, it's cool, but the older you get, or maybe even the deeper in your scene you get, the less cool it becomes.
I think it's the deeper in your scene.
Yeah, most likely, because I got into like heavier music as I got older in my teens, and then in my college years, I was like really into metal. It took me like out of college before I started going back into my punk roots, which is now where I firmly am planted.
So you've been involved in music for a lot of years, you said. And the co-host of Punk Lotto, that's your brother, correct?
Yes, it is. It's Dylan. Yep.
So how did you and Dylan, like, how did that come up to start a podcast?
So we are from North Carolina,
Right.
and I live in Hickory, North Carolina, and he lived in Winston-Salem at one point. And we started to do a podcast then. We recorded like 1 or 2 episodes. We didn't have a gimmick other than we were just going to talk about music. We didn't have any sort of like idea of even what the show would be. And then like we never did anything with them. And then he and his wife moved to Phoenix,
Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess he was out there maybe even less than a year, or maybe even just past a year. And I had this idea kicking around in my head that like I still wanted to do a podcast in some sort. So I pitched it to him as a way to stay in contact with him, like basically to force him to have a conversation with me.
Hey, we gotta talk at least once a week for an hour about music. Yeah.
Right. And we just came up with a good idea for the show, which has evolved quite a bit from its early stages.
Yeah.
But
so the current model, at least what you were telling me, is that basically you give your guest a year and then they pick an album from that year, somewhere in the punk or punk related kind of worlds. What's like the date range of years you're working with? Like, are we going all the way back to 1955, or is it like a certain, like, is it like what's the date range?
So we were pretty strict with it originally. We said 1976 because that was the year of the first Ramones record.
Sure. Okay.
And so there's a lot of albums that came out before.
That to present?
Yes, 1976 to the present. And like there's other bands that would be considered proto-punk or pre-punk that people tie into it that we wouldn't be against talking about. But just to give people a variety of choices, we start with 76 and use to today, yeah.
So are you going like in order, or is it kind of like randomly picking a year each time?
So our early version of the show consisted of us using a number generator to pick the year.
Okay.
So we tried to like pick something from each decade. We wouldn't like to repeat a year in the same decade back to back early on. But then it just sort of evolved into what our guests were comfortable with, what era of punk and punk related music they were most familiar with. So it would just be then like, what do you like? 90s, 80s, 2000s, and then
I would give them a year within that.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously there's, we're talking about several decades, but do you have any, like, just in mind either any like particularly standout years with like a lot of great music, or any just kind of lackluster years?
I thought of some good examples of both. One year that I thought was like, okay, for good stuff, 1994 is a great year.
Okay.
Because that's Green Day's Dookie came out that year.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of other bigger, more like important records from that time period came out in 94. So that was definitely a big standout year. And then 97 is another strong year because that's where the ska explosion happens.
I think that was Blink-182 Dude Ranch too.
I believe that's right. There's a lot of emo in that year as well. Yeah. And then like 2010 was like a shockingly good year, especially because that was when I was very heavily involved in my local scene. So
2010, I would have been in Ohio in school, but I also feel like a lot of the stuff, like anything I listened to in college, so many of those bands put out great records in 2010.
Yeah, it was a really great year for the emo revival, which was
Yeah.
like Snowing and Algernon Cadwallader, and then there was like the I guess the fest punk, for lack of a better term, like your Iron Chic and Reviver type bands. But yeah, 2010 was a really great year.
Yeah.
As far as lackluster years, I found that the late 80s are especially light when it comes to like really great records.
Really?
1986, that's the year I was born. You always hope that the year you're born is like a lot of great records came out that year.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of good stuff that year. And I've always been disappointed. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, there's some good college rock, I guess. That's about all, really. And then I'm trying to think of another year that wasn't. A lot of those late 80s years were not great. But then I distinctly remember we did a decade review of the 2010s.
Okay.
And we were like going through each year in that decade talking about records we liked. And then 2014 and 15 were really light on stuff that like we were like hardcore into. Like there's great stuff every year regardless. But those 2 years I remember thinking is like, wow, what happened? Like
Yeah.
we were on a roll. There were some really great years at the beginning of the decade. And yeah, I think the scene changed a bit and didn't really have an identity.
Yeah.
And I think that might explain why it was so weak. But yeah, those are some notable years.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I went to Fest in 2014, and I can only tell you a handful of bands I saw, but I had a very good time. Like, I just kind of like run around and see like whoever.
Oh yeah. I've been going to Fest since Fest 7.
So would you go like every year?
Yeah. I've not missed a year, except for this year.
Yeah.
And maybe next year. I don't have a pass.
Who knows? Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah, that was my thinking. I was like, is it gonna happen? I'll wait and maybe buy a pass later. Second market if I have to, but
right.
If it happens.
Yeah, I've been the one time I was a photographer, and I'd love to go down again. If it ever were to work out. Yeah. One thing I was also curious about is how are you choosing guests to come on your show? Like, what makes you go, oh, that's someone that I really want to have on Punk Lotto?
So the first 40 or so episodes, we had no guests.
Okay.
And we got a lot of negative reviews.
Oh, really?
From people who just didn't like our opinion. So,
now you're like, oh, you can just get mad at somebody else's opinion, not mine.
So we were like, we got to have a different opinion on our show other than the two of us. Like, we're brothers and we're 4 years apart and our taste of music is very similar. So we needed a dissenting opinion. So it started by just having a couple of our friends on, people who were like in bands or ran record labels. And then it became just basically anyone who like interacted with us a lot on social media. I just reached out to them. And then like, I guess most recently it just became who put out a record this year that I really like. And I asked them. So
why not? Yeah.
We used to say like the cheat code to be a guest on our show is just to talk at us a lot online and we'll have you on.
I mean, I will say that's also effective for Generation GC. I think I want to say, because I know it was Twitter we connected on, I feel like it was Scott at Flying the Call tagging us.
I was thinking that too.
Because I know he's a few times done tweets where he's like, oh, here's like a bunch of podcasts I like.
Yeah, he's definitely done that where he'll just like, it's time to share, all these podcasts that I really like. So I definitely think I went through that list and like added everybody he tagged.
Same.
Scott's great.
Oh, he's great. He's on episode 42, by the way, which you have not heard at this point, but it will have aired by the time this goes live.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing that one.
It's a great one. So last question before we dive into Broken Hearts Parade. And you don't have to answer this like with a solid answer right now, but you can if you want. I was thinking we could revisit it later. Is Good Charlotte punk? Are they pop punk? Can a band be both punk and pop punk? What are your just initial thoughts on that question?
Gut feeling, like immediate, like just right out the gate. Yes, of course, they're a pop punk band, like for sure. There is definitely a type of punk fan who thinks that you have to have a certain attitude or act a certain way to even be allowed into this special club.
Which I kind of think is like extremely not punk, but
right. So to me, there are some elements of punk that like. There are some elements of punk that is just like I don't think that would be allowed. Usually, it's more like overtly awful people, like racist, homophobic, that kind of stuff. People can get into punk and then turn out to be really, bad people, but the scene itself kind of has this policing aspect as far as like we don't want to be associated with that person. So
right.
I think, who is a punk? Like, who is to say what is or isn't a punk?
Right.
So there is a sound element and there's an attitude element, but even then, it can be many, many things. So yeah, sure. I definitely think Good Charlotte fit.
Sure. Awesome. So I feel like this song is pretty divisive. Yeah. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you about it because there's a lot to talk about. Why did you want to talk about Broken Hearts Parade?
So the reason why I even started talking to you about being on the show is you asked for people who wanted to talk about Good Morning Revival on Twitter. And I think I just responded with, I've always thought that was a good pop record. Like, it's just a solid, enjoyable pop record. And even though I'm not necessarily a Good Charlotte fan, I had heard this album in 2007 and thought even back then, I was like, this is a good record. Yeah. It was unexpected. So then I went through the list of what songs you haven't covered yet or what were still available. And I was like, oh, The River's Gone. I Don't Want to Be in Love's gone. Yeah. Like, I was like, oh, well, what's this down here at the end? And so I got to Broken Hearts Parade, and my initial reaction was, this is the song with horns in it.
Yep. Yep.
This is the one I want to talk about.
Yeah. So do you like the horns?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like them. I think they're kind of silly, but I also feel like this song is kind of silly.
It is a little bit. I don't know if you want to save that, but
well, let's talk about, I guess, what this song is about, as well as like what kind of tone, like what do you think is silly about it?
So I was trying to figure out like exactly what about this song that was just slightly off. Right. And part of it, I guess, yes, there's horns in there, which they've not really used before, correct?
Ever. And they never used, I don't think they ever used since.
So, like, that was initially like, that's a choice.
Right.
But then, like, digging into, it's like a faster song, too, for the album. If it's not the fastest song on the album, maybe. I don't know how you could really judge that, but
like BPM, but I don't.
Right. But like, it's definitely one of the most upbeat tracks on the record. But digging into the lyrics, I kind of get the feeling that like it's not really about anything or any particular event specifically.
Yeah.
It feels more like just a combination of like ideas maybe, or like concepts, and then
like this is about a specific person, a specific
right,
yeah,
right. It's honestly, it felt reading the lyrics and listening to the rest of the record, it feels like album filler in the sense, but they wanted to try something different. They didn't want to waste it with just like, here's just a throwaway track, but like they wanted to stretch.
See, I feel like lyrically it actually fits in pretty well with the rest of the album. And I'll make my case. I feel like this song is coming from the place, like the point of view of someone who is just pretty jaded about love. Like maybe they had a recent breakup, maybe they just had a lot of issues growing up. Maybe they just have not been lucky in love, and they've just you just get that belief that love isn't real. Everyone has baggage. Everyone you ever want to date is going to break your heart. Everyone who appears to be happily dating someone is breaking their hearts. There's no such thing as a healthy, loving relationship. I think what's kind of odd about this song is the point of view. Like, because you're right, it doesn't sound like it's about a specific person or specific thing. So it's like, is he writing about himself and like his own attitude? Like, is he a member of the Broken Hearts Parade? Is he commenting on other people? Is he commenting on a specific person? That is like, as was like re-listening to it, getting ready for this, that's what I was thinking about. Like, what's the point of view here?
And what really throws the song off is this weird, like, there's other people in the parade. He's talking about, we're wearing black, we're singing along. So it is, from the point of view of someone who's gone through some bad experiences or bad relationships.
Maybe the we is like his fellow, our narrator's fellow single bachelor friends that are also pretty like angsty about love.
And I think that might be what it is. It's people, it's maybe it's this misery loves company type attitude.
Yes. Yeah.
So like, it's like, I'm going to get together with all my friends who have also had these same problems, and we're going to, help each other out. Maybe, I guess, being around each other,
bitch together,
Yeah. Like you wonder if it's like they got together because of negative reasons. So it's like, is this a good relationship? Was it more toxic?
Right. I mean, I think it's good to talk about your experiences, especially if there was like a recent situation.
It felt like it was just he had, I don't know who the primary songwriter was on this one lyrically, but it feels like they just had a couple different ideas and kind of like, well, let's just put them together in this one song.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder if there's like a couple different situations being referred to, maybe. Like, the first verse, he's talking about everywhere we go, we've got skeletons that follow. We got baggage, we're going to drag it everywhere we go for everyone to see. And then the second verse, they talk about how do we get started, let go of your heart, love it, live it, leave it, and get into it. Like, just ignore your heart. So I'm kind of like, is that two different situations, like two different conversations? Maybe that's the Broken Hearts Parade, is these like a whole bunch of people who are, brokenhearted and forever alone are giving each other unhelpful love advice.
Yeah, it isn't odd. See, like, it's almost like two different, like, there's the one who's talking about all their baggage and then also love it and embrace it almost. So I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's two separate pieces of advice, those two verses, right? And they're two pieces of love advice from someone who is, not feeling, someone who's like not a hopeless romantic, someone who's not feeling very romantic.
Yeah. But then I don't understand where the parade comes from. Like, who are they exactly? in relation to the first. I don't know.
Yeah, that I don't know. So the chorus reads, "And the Broken Hearts Parade, I'm putting my heart out on display. There's no masquerade, just a funeral march for love today. The band strikes up and they're playing our song, dressed in black, and we're singing along to the Broken Hearts Parade. And I've never been better than I am today." I kind of think it's like a word that sounded good. Like, that's what I kind of get out of this, which again adds to it being kind of a silly song. Like, the Broken Hearts Parade, and I'm putting my heart out on display. There's no masquerade, just a funeral march for love today. Like, to me, as I'm like sitting down and reading that, I'm like, that sounds like lines that someone that is, you know, has a bad attitude about love due to their past experiences, they're just like spitting things out. And that's valid, right? Like, I've been there.
Yeah, it's like, I don't care. This is how I feel. Like
it's like a theme song, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it's not really. And then in the bridge, they go, "I used to lie awake at night and wonder when she's coming home. It used to be so hard to wake up every day." Like, does that relate? Maybe that relates to whatever's going on in the first two verses, but it's not really clear if it does. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's an idea and just like, all right, this and this and this. Like, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's all about one person per se.
Because that's even a past tense there. I used to lie awake. I used to be hard to wake up.
Yeah.
So is it not anymore because you found the parade?
Maybe. Well, right. Maybe it's like, I used to be so like down and lonely, and now I've decided that I'm over it, and I'm just gonna have this attitude where nothing can affect me, and I'm gonna be emotionally unavailable, and that's how I'm gonna get through the day.
Yeah, it definitely just strikes me as like good ideas for lyrics, and then they're like, "Oh, well, we need some verses to go along with it too."
It definitely strikes me as like a theme song or like a closing theme, right? And then you have March On being played as the credits roll.
Right.
Or maybe March On is like your prologue song or something, you know?
So this is
or
like
epilogue, sorry.
Yeah,
epilogue. This
is the climax. Like, it's a rousing, like, we're all in this together type call to arms almost. Yeah. Without necessarily saying it as much. I guess that's what the parade is. Like, we're all in this together, healthier or not. Right.
Let's go into what the band has said about the song.
Okay, yeah.
So, Billy told Pop Matters that he hated the horns.
Horns are divisive.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read this. "I absolutely hated the horns. I protested them as much as I could, but I got voted down. I've never been a fan of that kind of stuff. It's just too 90s. The kids seem to love it because they say it sounds like our first record, but I just can't get into it. We tried it live once, and it was a disaster. For the horns, we used a computer, and it was so bad that we just started laughing on stage. We knew that we would never try it again."
Does he think it's 90s because 90s ska was a big thing?
Maybe.
Because to me, the song itself does not sound especially 90s.
No, doesn't sound 90s to me either. I guess maybe it is just the horns thing.
And the part about it being they used a computer.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder still, like, was it fake horns in the first?
Well, but I don't know if necessarily, because maybe they tried it live and it was, who knows? I don't know if it was real horns on the record. I kind of think it is, but maybe they tried to use a computer to play like a recording, like a sample of it, and it just did not sound good.
Yeah.
Because unless you're a ska band, you're not going to have like a trumpet player on tour.
Right. Unless you're going to go out and like actually get a horn player to come on tour with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
For one song.
Right. I just have to mention that Billy also mentioned to the Georgia Strait that he did not like this song. So here's a paragraph, and we'll talk I also want to talk about like this piece as a whole, because the whole characteristic of this piece like is something. While Martin admits that the band absolutely worries about a diminishing audience, his personal animus toward the album's token return to pop punk bounce, Broken Hearts Parade, is revealing. I protested the Ska Horns. I wasn't feeling that, he says, before glumly adding that it was nonetheless polled as the fan favorite on the band's website. So, I don't know if you got a chance to read this whole article, but it, like, the write-up of the article made Billy sound like he was just over it. Like, annoyed at the interviewer, like, not into the conversation, but also just over, like, being in the band. Like, or maybe not over being in the band, but, like, over talking about the record. And that was, like, the whole thing of this piece was that negativity. So, like, I do wonder, like, was the interviewer, you know, did the interviewer pull this from certain parts to put together a certain story, or was that representative of, you know, the entirety of the conversation that was had?
You know, it's very well possible, because a writer does have a narrative regardless of how objective they claim to be. So it could be that, like, this writer was just, like, maybe not a fan of the band and was just like, this is my interpretation of this conversation. And it could just been an off day.
Right. Could have been an off day where he was, like, just exasperated and he had done 5 interviews in a row. And
I do object to him calling them Ska Horns. Just because they're horns doesn't make it actually Ska Horns.
Yeah, so, like, how do we define Ska Horns then? Because, like, in terms of a guitar rhythm, I could sort of identify, like, what a ska guitar rhythm would sound like. And
ultimately, I guess there's no specific Ska Horn sound. I think it has to be accompanied with a more traditional, like, upstroke guitars, like a dance, like kind of like a dancing bass line. Because I'm trying to think of, like, any of the, like, every ska album I've ever heard that has horns on it, because you can be ska without horns.
Totally.
It doesn't necessarily have, like, the horn sound like this. Because the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones are a perfect example of a band with a giant horn section that they are definitely professional, like, horn players. And then there's maybe the ska band who has, like, one horn or, like, a sax. And it's not just this one sound. So I think you need the guitar work and the bass to truly make it a ska song. Because you, like,
what would ska bass be, like, definitively?
There's a lot of, like, walking up and down the neck, just, like, a lot of action. Like, not instead of, like, playing, like, a root or, like, the same thing strummed over and over again. Like, it's definitely, like, a unique, I don't know. It's much more complex than your, like, a pop punk song.
Okay.
So, and then, like, with horns, there's plenty of soul and funk records that have horns on them too. So those are clearly not ska records. So.
Do you know Keep Flying, the band?
No, unfamiliar.
So they, 2 of the band members, although I think DJ left, but it was at one point Henry and DJ Menzel, Charlie, Peter, John, and I would say, but John plays sax and DJ was playing trombone. But I would have said Keep Flying was more of like a pop punk band, if anything. That just happened to have some horns. But DJ and Henry's previous band, Survey Says, was more of a ska band.
Yeah, like, Five Iron Frenzy is one of my all-time favorite bands, and they're called a ska band, but a lot of the ska elements kind of disappear on, like, the back half of their catalog. So then they turn into more just like a pop punk or just even almost alternative rock at some points with horns. So yeah, there's lots of uses of horns that can.
I mean, you could have horns in pop music, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Like hip hop uses samples with horns in it all the time, you know? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Horns itself does not make ska. And you can be ska without horns.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of the first records, some of the first Good Charlotte record has like kind of been compared to ska. I guess because of like Waldorf Worldwide, which is, I don't know. People say you can sort of hear like a reggae-ish kind of, but I don't know if I really buy that. I don't know. I'm not a ska expert at all, but I don't feel like this is ska, despite the inclusions of horns.
Yeah, I've never even really tied them in with ska in any way. Even the early stuff I've heard, I've not thought of them as a ska band. I'm not a ska expert either, but I've definitely our show we dedicated the month of August to what we called Ska-gist, and we only talked about ska records for the month of August. So like,
I love that.
I've listened to a lot of ska in my life, so yeah, I've never grouped them in with that at all.
Yeah, I've always felt like I need to check out more ska, just because I know there's like so much history and so much to learn. But please tell me you're familiar with Ska-Tune Network.
Oh, absolutely. I love that Jer spends all day on Twitter just explaining ska to people.
It's amazing.
It's a thankless task almost at this point.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I wonder if they would be into this, because then we could really have a discussion on ska.
Right. They're super knowledgeable of like there's all those videos of them on there saying like explaining what ska is. So yeah, I think they would have an opinion on this song.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And ska to me, like, as much as I could sometimes equate Good Charlotte to somewhat of a cult band, like despite how big they got, they have like a pretty passionate following. But ska to me, from the little I know about it, just feels very much like I don't know if like a cult or like a big family. And like I would mention some ska band I had known, like a local New Jersey ska band, to someone I went to school with in Ohio, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah," and I'd be like, "What? Like, why do you know who that is?"
Yeah, there's definitely like, if you were of a certain age and you were like around when ska exploded, there's a definite subset of people who were just into it because it was what was popular at the time. But then there's those other people who like took it and kept it and ran with it kept it alive throughout the 2000s when there weren't that many big ska records. So
I mean, I don't think ska will ever die. Like,
no, it never will. I mean, it's gone back to the 40s and 50s. So yeah, ska will never die. It'll just evolve again into something new, like it always has.
Yeah. Justin, did you have any like memories that you wanted to share about Broken Hearts Parade?
So I was trying to remember when I heard the song for the first time, and I want to say it was my last semester in college. It would have been spring 2007, and my fiance at the time told me that like, hey, the new Good Charlotte record's actually really good. Like, we were very surprised because they were just not one of our bands. And so I was riding with a friend in their car, and I want to say The River came on, and I was like, this is good. Like, I was really surprised. And so then I downloaded the album, listened to it, picked out some of the songs I liked, but when I got to Broken Hearts Parade, it was definitely like, this is my favorite song on the album. Like, it's so different from the rest of the record. Even like removing the horns, like guitar wise, it feels more like an older record, and maybe that's what Billy was also getting at too in that interview, because even it's like a faster song, and it just feels like more like their early material.
I kind of wonder what if they had just done this without the horns and truly leaned into that, like they're very different songs, but I think of like I Heard You, which was like on the first record, and that was like a pretty fast song, and I could almost hear like those kind of guitars in this song.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could have been a single. Well, I don't know. A lot of times record labels like to pick songs that are not necessarily representative of the album, and it's like the band trying something different. So maybe it wouldn't have.
Yeah. Who knows? I don't know. But Paul, I also wanted to mention Paul Thomas had told Top Tables in Bangkok that he refuses to play this song live. So I don't know. Maybe that's because of the horn incident that Billy mentioned. Maybe Paul voted for the horns and then they tried to play it live and it didn't go well.
You know, I think a lot of bands have those songs too. They're just like, no, we don't play this live.
Yeah. People might like it, but we're not going to play it.
Right.
So if we're going to lean into, the different things you could do with this song, we got to mention greatest remixes. So y'all listeners know my feelings about greatest remixes. This song was included on there not once, but twice. Why was it included on Greatest Remixes twice? Because why not? So the first one was featuring Filiano and Tabby Boney. And it was like kind of a chill reggae type of vibe, which is, a step away from ska, if we're saying this is ska.
Yeah, I listened to both of these that were on this album, and this is the one I like the most.
Same. I didn't like the other. The other one, the second one was Prophet and Vanderbilt. But yes, go on with the Filiano and Tabby.
Yeah, the Filiano one has this like dub vibe to it.
Yeah.
That I guess they heard the horns in the song and were like, let's lean into that. Like, let's make it more like a chill dub remix. And it works like really well. The other one, like, I don't know what they really even did with that one.
Yeah, I really don't.
They took away a lot of the instrumentation and just kind of put this like slight sort of synthy beat over it. And there's like an effect on the vocals too. I just, it's not very memorable. The first one was much better.
Yeah, the first one was much better. The first one was much better to the point that I'm like, I wonder if it was just they were just reaching out to different people and the people kind of picked which songs they wanted to do. And that's why this song is on there twice.
Do any other songs appear twice on there?
We're going to check right now because I was just thinking about that.
Because I'm unfamiliar with the Remixes album.
Yeah, you're fine. No other song appears twice.
So it definitely spoke to them in some way.
Yeah. I mean, it's also maybe they were like, okay, well, there's a lot you could dig it, like some different angles you could dig into with this song. So open to interpretation.
Yeah.
And I guess if it was polled as a fan favorite on the website, then that would explain why they're like, all right, we can do this twice.
When was that poll taken? I
don't know. I assume because the interview with Billy, those interviews were both like spring, summer 2007. So I assume it was like around then.
So it's probably like even a poll specifically to the album. Probably like, what's your favorite track on the record?
Yeah, that's the impression that I got.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that would make a lot of sense if that inspired the choice to put this song twice on Greatest Remixes. So one thing I was very delighted to find is a like academic paper. So the paper is called Tipping the Scales, a substantive theory on the value of group music therapy for supporting grieving teenagers. In the publication is Qualitative Inquiries in Music Therapy, an issue in 2010, and the author is Katrina McFerrin. So I read bits of the paper, but academic reading is hard to read.
Right.
The concept what I understood of the concept of this study was they had groups of teenagers who were grieving, and they would they would both bring in songs that they liked, and they would talk about the music, and they would play music. And there's a whole list of songs, and I'll link this paper in the show notes, but there's a whole list of songs that there was a list that was songs about grief, and then there was just songs that the members of the group brought in, songs mentioned in group. And someone in this study loved this album because they also mentioned the river and dance floor anthem.
There's someone in the study who was just they must. This is 2010 when this happened.
Yeah, 2010.
Too, so, so someone was I like this album.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if I had been in a study about music therapy, I'm sure I would have brought up whatever Good Charlotte record had most recently come out. That is really, really funny, though. But I looked at the whole list of songs, and it was there was Blink-182, I Miss You, a lot of similar kind of veins. They said the majority of the songs were punk rock or alternative rock for Group 1, where Group 2, which is the one that selected this song, selected rock music with more of a popular or dance influence. This sounds like this album. Rock music with a pop or dance influence. I think that's a cool study.
I pulled up the list too because I wanted to see what other. I like that they put Green Day as one word.
Yes. Well, it's an academic writing. I would hesitate to guess that the person who did this study is a music fan if that's their field of research.
Right.
But
you wouldn't go into music therapy unless you were a big fan
unless you
of it.
Probably also had a personal connection to music.
Right.
But
somebody brought in a Mike and the Mechanics song, which I thought was surprising.
I think there was some My Chemical Romance in there.
Yeah, there's a couple.
If we talk about grief and
welcome to the Black Parade.
Yeah,
is on there. Yeah. Yeah, I guess those are the closest sounding bands: Good Charlotte, My Chemical Romance, and Green Day.
Blink. I think there was definitely a Blink song.
There's a couple Linkin Park songs, which if we're talking about teenagers, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
Linkin Park's gonna make an appearance.
Yeah, I would be really curious. This writer's what music was this writer into? The researcher, the one who wrote this this academic paper.
Yeah, it'd be funny if it was this is not my music at all.
Right, what have I gotten into? But it could be someone who is not that far removed, because maybe this is someone who is in grad school and they're 23 and they were oh, this is not I loved the first Blink record, who knows?
I was looking at the Group 1 CD one. Yeah. Someone picked an Elliott Smith song and 2 Sarah McLachlan songs. Those are very sad people.
I mean, yeah, it's a study of teenagers who are grieving. So,
right.
Yes, it's definitely sad people.
That's a group that's definitely had it harder. It seems like if you're using Elliott Smith.
Yeah. But I think something I also gleaned from my little skim of the study was that it wasn't just songs about grief, but that teenagers who were grieving were trying to figure out their sense of identity and who they were. And so just any music that kind of talked about that was also really helpful.
Yeah, because teenagers especially are the ones who are who am I? What am I? What's my everything?
And if you have a major loss when you're a teenager, that's that would totally just make that even harder.
Yeah, it'll just like amplify everything that just the average teenager was going to be experiencing.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's read some reviews. There's some commentary from NME in their review, and NME has been so like back and forth on Good Charlotte. So we're just gonna read this. Dance Floor Anthem, Broken Hearts Parade, Misery. It might be all the rage for supermarkets to label their products, but for effectively posting their latest album's nutritional content in the form of a track listing, Good Charlotte should be praised. Just imagine a world where you can walk into HMV, pick up a CD, and read exactly what you're going to get out of it on the reverse cover. But despite their claims of a complete reinvention and of ignoring the bandwagoning Panic at the Disco caught electro bits, this is still unmistakably Good Charlotte. Vile, goth jock pop with all the wit and nuance of a urine-soaked sock. Infectious, irritating, discolored, Good Charlotte have all the makings of a fantastic venereal disease. Good Morning Revival, then, it's like chlamydia for your ears. Initial reaction, the urine-soaked sock comment and the chlamydia comment, completely out of line.
This is clearly someone who in 2007 was like Green Charlotte. Good Charlotte is not cool now, so we are allowed to really rip on them.
Yeah, they had a similar review of Cardiology a few years later, but this like outside of the comments that I pointed out with the sock and the disease mention, which I just think are incredibly out of line and not even relating to the music, you know what I mean? Vile goth jock pop with no wit and nuance, like frankly, that whatever, like say that, you know what I mean? Infectious, irritating, discolored, whatever, like a lot of what they say about the record, I'm like, I could see why you would say that, right? Like the track listing as a label, but it was not the same person that reviewed Cardiology for NME. But whoever reviewed Cardiology for NME a few years later had like a very nasty review as well. Not as vulgar, but just like not things you should say. Like they're not relevant.
It's trying to push the button as far as like, if I say the most outrageous thing about this record, then people will be more interested in my writing.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas instead it's like, well, you're not actually being objective in any way. Or music is such a subjective thing, but at the same time, there is some objectivity as far as like, it took some effort to make these songs. So like, to call it a urine-soaked sock line
it's
is
just
the
like
one
that. There's nothing like that, and the chlamydia venereal disease line. To me, it's like that is offensive. It has nothing to do with the song itself.
It'd be one thing if maybe the album was like putting across a message that was like just deeply offensive.
Well, but even frankly, it's like, look, like STDs are real, like you know, like when it's like they could have said with all the wit and nuance of a wet sock.
Yeah,
like they could have said that. It would not have been like vulgar. It would have got the exact same point across.
There was this attitude in I saw this discourse actually this week, which I guess we're recording this a little earlier than when it'll come out, but I saw some discourse on Twitter from other writers talking about the early the 2000s, especially like the Pitchfork reviewing scene was just trying to top each other as far as like being mean about records.
Oh yeah.
And then how writing has in the recent years kind of evolved into talking about stuff the writers actually like,
which I have a lot of theories on. But
so like it's funny to see this review from this exact time period when I've just been reading about that as well. Yeah.
And I'm sure I saw a lot of that discourse, that same discourse that you did. You know, I will never, like, I don't think I would ever write an album review of a Good Charlotte album. Like, I've interviewed the band and I've written about their singles, like news posts. I have reviewed their shows. To me, that's a little different. Although I'm even like, yeah, I have mixed feelings about that at this point. But I would review their shows again, you know? But I don't, like, personally, I don't think I would ever review a Good Charlotte record because I have such an emotional tie to it.
Well,
like, I just couldn't be objective enough, I don't think.
That's true, but you can also state that in the review, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Like, this is
like, I am completely biased. I will say exactly how I feel, but
it's a biased take.
Maybe not for a publication, but maybe for a personal blog. That would be
right. It's the kind of thing I could. Yeah, it's just why. Like, you could still have a negative, angry review that, frankly, would not be wrong because they have like good points in this, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like you could have cut out the, in my opinion, just offensive and objectively unrelated comments and still had a good review, you know? But I think you're right. It's reflective of that, you know, kind of early mid-2000s. Just be really mean to artists that aren't cool. Kind of,
and especially
culture.
coming from like Enemy, who was they were kind of past their prime at this point. Like Spin at this point wasn't as, you know, well known. Like the 90s is definitely Enemy's heyday. So yeah, I guess they were just trying to trade in their cred with some harsh reviews.
Yeah, which I feel like the way, at least from my perception, that's not how places get cred now. Like in the past several years, the way you get cred is by being the first one to break an artist.
Right.
And then being right and the artist blows up.
Yeah. And yeah, the internet too has made it so much easier to find music on your own. Like, a lot of people don't need these publications anymore, and they'll just find a publication that they do like they like their tone of writing, or
right, or they're like, this publication writes about the music I like.
Like, I adore the Gray Estates.
Yeah, I follow them.
Everything they write there, I adore. I hate that they're taking a hiatus, but I know it seems like it's for good reasons, right? But at the same time, it's like, this is like my lane. Like, everything they wrote about, I pretty much enjoyed. So,
I mean, and I'll have, you know, I have a lot of friends that are music writers, and like sometimes they write about music they like. Sometimes they write about music that I have no interest in. But and obviously the bias that like my friends, but I can be like, oh my gosh, you're a great writer, and I just love reading your writing. Which to me as a writer, that's like the ultimate compliment. Someone's like, I never would have checked out this band, but you're a good writer, so I read what you had to say, and then, you know.
Right. Like, there's sites that are just like, here is a quick 2-star review of a record. Like right. Something like, or it's not even like that much of a review. They're just like, here's some news. Like Punk News. Yeah. Has just turned into just like, here's press releases.
Yeah.
Which, like but then, like, I have friends, like, who write for sites like No Echo, which is a hardcore site, and, like, the writing is very good on those articles. I
could never write about hardcore. Like, I could do, like, a news post, but I just, like, I'm not knowledgeable enough about hardcore to, like, really write about it.
But that's, like, a group of just, like, genuinely great writers that even if I maybe don't like the music as much, the writing made me go try it. So
I mean, and I've found artists that I enjoy, you know, through that kind of thing, with people who are good writers. Definitely, it's like, you know, obviously music is just easier to access. It's so easy to discover music now. It's also easy for people to write about music, and it's easy to find music writing that you like and people that are writing about what you like. And if nobody's writing about the stuff that you like, well, then you can start something. And I don't know, I'm in like some Facebook networking, like music industry groups, and every so often the question will come up like, does anyone have advice about starting like a music website or a blog? And my advice will just be like, yeah, think really hard before you do that, and maybe don't do it. Maybe write for someone else instead. Which is like that is like a whole separate take. And not to say that I regret starting a music blog, because I don't. It was like a great thing, but
there's definitely something about the ownership that's
it's so
rewarding,
huge.
but at the same time, it's so hard to get your voice heard in that.
Yeah.
That's like
I have a poster like framed on my wall. I have a tattoo of my music blog's logo. Like it was such a great thing that I'm so proud that I did. But it's also like I went into it with no prior experience.
See, and my brother and I have started blogs in the past before as well. And we did some interviews on them. We did reviews, lists, all sorts of stuff, and gained like no traction.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And we were never
hard.
really negative. What was your blog?
Circles and Sound Waves.
See, my blog was Figureheads of Pop. So
yeah.
Like it's so hard to break through, especially probably when we were writing.
Yeah. I mean, I was writing, like, I ran the blog 2011 to 2018, and, I ended it because I had always kind of been like, this is not necessarily going to be something that's going to be forever. Like, I hope that it leads to other opportunities. And it did. Like, it led to several other opportunities, and I had other places I was writing for, and at the time I ended it, I was like, I feel like I'm done with the running a blog chapter of my life, and I want to focus on writing.
It's kind of the same, because like I never had much success with it, but Dylan actually managed to get some writing jobs at New Noise magazine.
Amazing.
Even in like the print, side of things as well. So
amazing.
He's a fantastic writer. Like,
yeah.
I'm biased because he's my brother, but at the same time, I read his stuff and I go, I wish I could write like that.
I wrote for Substream for a bit after, which I feel like is kind of on a similar level to New Noise, although a different focus, and they did lose their print a while ago.
Yeah.
But when Substream did have print, I was like, oh, it's like, similar kind of thing. But different audience, I think. Different focus.
Yeah.
Well, let's read one more little review and some other comments and such of Broken Hearts Parade. Music OMH, which is definitely a site we've mentioned before on this show because that sounds familiar, called it gargantuan pop rock. I don't really know what that is supposed to mean, but I wouldn't like disagree per se. Like, I don't know, I guess gargantuan probably means like larger than life, like big.
Yeah, I definitely would call this like a big pop, like huge pop. Yeah, I've definitely used these terms.
I approve that statement.
Yeah.
So I'm just like searching like for interviews and reviews and comments about the song. Someone actually mentioned this song. There was a Reddit thread. There's a whole Good Charlotte subreddit. It's not that active. I've like browsed it and lurked it, but it's like not very active. There was a Reddit thread about Good Charlotte songs about depression. Backstory being that, I guess in an interview a couple years ago, Benji Madden had said something about like realizing kind of after the fact that their first few records were about depression and being depressed, which like, but he didn't really realize it at the time, which like, yes, the first few records are definitely a lot about that. And so someone mentioned this song, which is not the first like 3 records, but I don't know. I hadn't thought about that before, but it does actually make a lot of sense. And I'll tell you why. Because like in my own personal experience, someone that is very negative, that is very cynical, that is very irritable, that is very like, I hate everything, like the narrator of this song, oftentimes that person is very depressed. Like,
and may not know it.
Right. So I don't think this song, I don't know. this isn't like a hold on or march on or SOS or motivation proclamation. That's like very clearly about being sad. But I do actually appreciate that comment a lot, because I think that makes like a lot of sense. Let's read some comments from songmeanings.com, which has like honestly become my favorite website in the world. So, as a note, this song was recorded in 2006. The album was recorded in 2006, before Welcome to the Black Parade came out. Bo05 said, Gerard Way must be LOLing at this song. Lame. And you got a lot of people having a lot of discourse about My Chemical Romance. And like, then you have people coming back saying, just because they used the parade doesn't mean they copied My Chemical Romance.
Right. If the song was written before the album came out, unless they were talking to those guys, which I doubt they were.
I mean, maybe, who knows? But
yeah, I don't know what their relationship was like. They existed in the same realm of music. So, but I guess even at this point, because My Chemical Romance had already done the first couple records, and this was them going into like their major label mainstream push too. So it is funny. It is like the same timing in the band.
But it's also like, I don't know, Welcome to the Black Parade. Like, that's the song that still gets played on the radio.
Yeah.
Like, pretty regularly.
And this wasn't a single either.
Right, exactly. So
there was something in the zeitgeist that made them both come to the same conclusion to write about parades.
Yeah. Pure Hedonism said, the lyrics are quite stupid, but you can't get them out of your head, just like I Just Want to Live. And then Veggie Style comes back and says, how in the world are these lyrics stupid?
I wouldn't say these lyrics are stupid.
No, they're like, it's kind of a silly song with like the horns and such taken into account, just because that was like out of left field for them, kind of. But like, that's kind of what this album was, I think. Someone had said trumpets and guitar, like, who knew trumpets and guitars could sound good together? And then XX Pretty comes back and says, have you never listened to ska music?
Right. There's over 50 years of guitars and horns together.
Yeah. The Vivtum says, well, I like the CD. Actually, this is my favorite song ever. It's cheesy, but in a good way. Joker 91 said that they think this song is against the internet. So the person who sings this song is happy that he can tell anyone in the world how bad he feels and his heart is broken and stuff like this, but in real life he's happy and doesn't have any problems at all. And you can join on MySpace and pages like this and those friend finders, but most of the people you talk with you won't see in your life. But sometimes they start a relationship and tell them I love you and I miss you, but they won't say this if they're standing face to face. I think the person in this song claims that love is dead because of the internet.
I don't really get that.
Yeah, I don't really either.
I mean, but if that's what inspires them, I mean, sure. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's like, I don't know. I just feel like that is more of like a very personal interpretation as opposed to like something that was clearly communicated in the song. But that doesn't mean it's wrong, No,
I mean, you could take there is something like, once an artist puts something out there is an argument that says it ceases to be that artist's, and then the audience then takes ownership. So there's something to it.
We'll read a couple Amazon reviews real quick. So Tim Bro, I don't know how to pronounce that, gave the album a 3 out of 5 and said, Good Morning Revival is an album that was made by a band in transition. Joel and Benji Madden went from being snot-nosed punks to being Hollywood gossip subjects. It's hard not to read Joel's tabloid fodder dalliance with Hilary Duff into Broken Hearts Parade, or the heartbreak ballad Where Will We Be Now, or the Good Boy Loses to Bad Boy Break Her Heart Apart tirade. However, it was their adolescent frenzy that made Good Charlotte interesting, and Good Morning Revival sounds like they want to become another generic arena rock band. I mean, I don't disagree with like their interpretation of this album at all. Like, I don't know if I get generic arena rock band, but I guess if you take songs like Something Else or Beautiful Place, that might sound more like that.
They were trying. It definitely sounds like a band trying to go for it, as far as like, we want this to be something outside of the norm for us, and for it to be successful.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about like the tabloidy like relationship stuff, so I didn't read that myself. The way this song specifically is written, I don't, like we talked about earlier, I don't get like a specific event tying it in there.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it is about, maybe a specific event did inspire it, maybe it didn't, but this song is not like, I think if I didn't know some of their relationship kind of personal history just from like reading a lot of, just because I was like 15 at the time and like loved reading gossip mags, you know. And I still enjoyed reading those. I don't think I would have necessarily like written into, oh, it's about this person kind of thing.
Yeah.
One more Amazon review. Anonymous user gave it a 2 out of 5 and said, there is some truly original stuff in here, unless I'm missing something, like Broken Hearts Parade and The River, but it's not enough to cover up the fact that Good Charlotte sounds confused and desperate for success. The arrival of Good Morning Revival is a sad day for Good Charlotte because they've become everything that people pegged them as, wannabes and cheap ripoffs. Sorry, guys, but this band has become the Kevin Federline of rock and roll. You know, I don't want to say I necessarily, like, I disagree in that I don't get that, the negative interpretation of that, but, like, I don't think that's, like, a wrong viewpoint, you know what I mean? Like...
Yeah, I mean, they're trying different things, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily desperate. It just...
Yeah.
They're just stretching and trying things that they haven't done before.
Yeah.
Trying for a little bit more of a mainstream appeal, because, you know, glossy pop punk isn't like... It has a ceiling. Like, there's a limit to how many people will be interested in in that sound, especially in the late 2000s.
I mean... And talk about Fall Out Boy, who basically went full pop and are bigger than they ever were when they made like pop punk or, you know, true emo.
Right. Yeah, it's not unusual. Like Jimmy Eat World went from being like just a straight up emo band to a pretty big alternative pop rock band. So
yeah,
it's just a well trod path that these type of bands follow. So.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I'm curious to see if they'll ever like bring back any of this kind of sound in future records. But I guess we'll just have to see. So, Justin, how has Broken Hearts Parade held up for you over time?
So I hadn't heard this song in 13 years.
Wow.
I heard it in 2007 when it was new, and then I didn't listen to it again until getting ready for this episode.
Right. So,
yeah, I think it gave me the exact same feeling I heard it in 2007, because I heard it, I was like, this is great, this is fun, this is upbeat, I enjoy it, it's got horns, I'm here for it. Like, that's exactly how I felt listening to it again now. So, yeah, I think it's held up pretty well. I mean, horns never made it into their discography going forward, so I mean, I guess it wasn't something that they particularly were interested in pursuing. But
I would love to hear Benji and Joel's opinions on the horns, because Billy and Paul commented, but I would guess Benji and Joel voted for the horns, but I am curious if they stand by that. Who knows?
I bet they would. I mean, I would. I mean, it works in the song, so there's no reason not to stand by it.
And I'm curious, like, if Billy and Paul have different opinions many years down the line.
It's true. They could have adjusted since then.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, you know? So, a few questions to wrap this up. What has Good Charlotte meant to you over the years, and how has that changed?
So, I mentioned earlier that they were never my band, and then they became uncool to like.
Very uncool, yes.
So there was this time period where I was just like, yeah, they're just that band, they're around, and I never thought too much about their music. And then in 2007, this album came out, and I was like, hey, I like this. Yeah. So over the years, as I went a little bit older, my opinions on music have kind of softened to the point of I don't get like as upset about things I don't like I did when I was like 19 or 20.
I think getting upset at things you don't like when you're 19 or 20 is a very common thing.
Right. And depending on what scene you're involved with, I was involved with like metal bands at the time.
Right. Oh God, yeah.
I was definitely not going to talk about like Good Charlotte in any positive way in 2007. I mean, but when that record came out, I enjoyed it. So 2006, I wouldn't say anything positive. Now I would say they are a good band who released maybe their best materials in the early part of their career.
Yeah.
But they wrote fun, catchy songs that spoke to a certain group of people that they stayed with it. So
yeah,
they did what they wanted to do, and it earned them an audience forever. So
yeah,
it's good for them. I wish I would have done something like that in my life.
Right? Doesn't like every creator want to do something that people are talking about many years down the road?
Right. Like I would love to have been in a band that now someone was doing a song by song podcast on.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. Like I told some of my parents' friends about it, and they were like, yeah, the one was like, if someone did something like this on the Smiths, like I'd be into that.
I'm sure it exists.
That's like I'm right, and I'm like, because I'm like that is like a cult band, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's ones for Blink-182.
Apparently Blink-155 just did their last episode.
Yeah, my friend is a very, very big fan of that show, and so he texts me constantly. He's like, "Oh, they did this on the show, and the show's ending," and so I was like, I assume they're going to do something else, because why would you waste like that following that you've developed at this point?
Yeah.
So maybe they'll pick another band and do their discography.
There's a podcast on 13 Reasons Why called 13 Reasons Why Not. And they've now, after they finish the show, they've now just rebranded to Why Not, and they talk about all kinds of like teen dramas and such. Like,
yeah, I mean, just shift over to something else.
Yeah.
Like there's a Propaganda podcast that's like pretty cool, and like, yeah,
I wonder if there's got to be a Taylor Swift podcast.
Oh, I bet there is. I bet.
Because I bet like you could totally do something like this about Taylor Swift, like.
Oh, for sure. Especially like she's a public figure too, in the sense that like she's tabloid, she's like awards person, like,
and she also, despite being like one of the biggest artists in the world, is like has that kind of cult following of like people who know every single detail of every single song, and they analyze like how many holes are in the fence. Like, Taylor Swift would be a great person to do a podcast about. It's got to exist.
I'm sure there's probably like 10 of them.
Yeah.
To be honest.
There's a bunch of Degrassi podcasts.
Oh yeah. Well, one of them hosted by Mike Park from Asian Man Records. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've listened to a few. He had Roswell Kit on for like I think it was like when Emma and Sean go on their first date, that episode, I think. But yeah, that one's fun. I think it's In Love with a Girl Named Spike. Which,
is the reference to a Skanky Pickle song. So like, if there was going to be a Degrassi podcast, I would hope Mike Park was involved with it.
Yeah. So, Justin, do you have any last words about Broken Hearts Parade, about Good Charlotte, or about yourself? Or about Punk Lotto?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like our show doesn't dive as deep onto like single songs like this one does. We look at things in an album as a whole. So like, I definitely listened to this album a couple times all the way through just so I could have the full context of the song. It's an enjoyable song where the band tried to do something different, and you have to commend them to that on a record full of songs where they were trying to do something different.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the stories about the producer like throwing out all the songs or maybe keeping like one out of a batch of 20. So they pieced together a record that even made 20-year-old me, metal me.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's pretty good, you know. So they accomplished something.
Because 20-year-old metalhead you very well could have been like, this is bad. Like, this is so uncool. Like,
yeah. I mean, 2007 was a pretty big year for me personally because I failed out of college and then came back to my hometown and shared a room with my brother. Got a job working at Barnes & Noble and then made friends here. And then I've stayed here. Yeah. So it was like the end of a chapter and the beginning of another. So like 2007 was important for me. And I think this record maybe wasn't one of those, at least in my musical development, the first hints of me expanding my horizons past metal and extreme stuff. So it's a noteworthy point in my life.
I like hearing about your background and, you know, being like a metal fan because it's, you know, like I listen to Punk Lotto and I'm like, oh, this is a guy that like just loves punk rock.
I mean, and that is what it is.
And you do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I'm not really much of a metal fan anymore. Like that side of me, it's just, I like to say that I burned out my bandwidth for that kind of music.
Like, was it just a phase?
Yeah, it probably was. Like, if you, in the grand scheme of my life, it seems more like a phase. Because I always liked punk stuff early on as a kid and like a teen. And Five Iron Frenzy was my all-time favorite band for years. So, like, I got into metal music because of, like, who I was friends with. And then in college, that expanded more so. But then it was also, like, the type of metal that was, like, it's not accessible. It's, like, the more extreme experimental stuff. But there was always that part of me that was, like, into punk music. So it just took making the right friends to really fully unlocking, like, everything I enjoyed. Like, I rarely ever listen to metal now. So I'm punk, indie, you know, that's my primary fields. But yeah.
Amazing. Well, okay, so you went ahead, you got ahead of things, and you sent me this song, but do you want to tell our listeners your recommendation for the Generation GC and Friends Spotify playlist?
Yeah, I was listening to the most recent episode you posted last week, getting ready for this episode. Okay. So I was listening to it, and then when I got to the end, I was like, oh, there's a playlist. So yeah. I think everyone likes a recommendation. So this song is called The Broken Hearts Parade, and it kept reminding me of a band that I was actually friends with. I'm still friends with the people in the band. And the name of the band is Old Flings, and they were from Asheville, North Carolina. They played Fest a couple times, toured Europe once, released like an LP and a bunch of 7-inches on some local labels. And like we became friends with them due to just like going to shows and seeing them. But they had a catchphrase that was long live the broken heart. Like that was their catchphrase. And it kind of became like they aren't a concept band, but the band is called Old Flings. And the majority of this the record is about relationships and like failed relationships at that. Yeah. So I've always associated them with like, you know, sad after a relationship. Like that's definitely the vibe they put out there. And I'm recommending the song Grip off of their record Spite. Came out in 2012. The style of music that they play is very influenced by Sam I Am and Knapsack. With a little bit of like Gin Blossoms thrown in there too. But yeah, just like the Broken Hearts Parade just reminded me of the Long Live the Broken Heart. And This song is more of an upbeat song. It's I picked it because it's like the most standout like tune on the record. That's the last track on the record is called Spite, and it's more of a downer, but it was their show closer too. But it's not a great introductory track, so I went with Grip because it's just like an upbeat song, and yeah, that's what it reminded me of, was them.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, that will be included in the playlist, listeners. Justin, thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you and the podcast on the internet?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah.
You can find our show at punklautopod.simplecast.com. That's kind of like the main site, and then you can get links to your other stuff. We have social medias, all that good stuff. But yeah.
Amazing. Justin, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to episode 44 of Generation GC. Wow, 44. That's so many episodes. Last week, we talked about Mountain from the Chronicles of Life and Death. Next week, we'll be talking about a song from Cardiology. My name is Molly Hudelson. I've been your host, and you can follow Generation GC at Generation GC Pod, POD, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also follow me, Molly, at M Hudelson, MHUDELSON, on Twitter and Instagram. And please make sure you're subscribed to the show or following on your preferred podcast provider: Apple, Spotify, Google, Anchor. We're on YouTube. We're on Overcast, Stitcher, any of the apps like that play your podcasts for you. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next week.